Big moves in the NFC, big moves in the AFC North. We're reacting to the trades at the deadline today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5.
Joe, trade deadline came and went yesterday, and maybe not the highest magnitude of like foundational shaking trades, but I thought all in all, this was not a disappointing trade deadline that came and went in the NFL this season. The Pittsburgh Steelers double dip, addressed the offense and the defense with a pass rush move. The Cincinnati Bengals, round of applause, got involved, acquired their third player in the last 52 years as an active in-season trade for the first time since 20. I don't remember. I'm going to look it up. So that's your cliffhanger. There's a stat, a big-time stat about draft picks and teams that we're going to cover here, but Za'Darius Smith finally goes to the Detroit Lions, and Marshon Lattimore moved with the Commanders coming out on top on that race, giving us a pretty significant draft capital, Joe.
Yeah, that feels like the big one. The Commanders acquiring Marshon Lattimore from the Saints. The Saints get Lattimore in a 2025 5 in exchange for a 3, a 4, and a 6.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting, I think, on both sides of the equation here. For Washington, credit to them. Like, what's been a hang up for me and really believing them as a contender, I think they're going to be in it in the NFC East. I think they're going to make the playoffs. I feel good about those things. But, like, the talent is kind of lacking, is particularly on the defense and the offensive line. This is a nice move here to help them out. Now, it doesn't come without concern. Marshon Lattimore is injured a lot. He's missed 17 games over the previous 2 seasons. He's missed 2 games already this year. It's always the hamstring. It's been the hamstrings dating back to his time at Ohio State. If he's healthy and on the field, this is a really, really talented cornerback that's going to help you in your efforts to win.
Well, and beyond this season too, the guaranteed money's not there, right? Because this deal was signed in 2021.
Yes, good. It's a good deal to take on. Yeah.
So New Orleans obviously having restructured the contract. Washington's only taken on about $600,000 of remaining base salary. The rest was paid out in lump sum by the Saints. And then he's owed $16 million in base salary and a $2 million roster bonus in 2025, and then $16.5 with a $2 million roster bonus in 2026. None of that money guaranteed. So you have a ton of flexibility. Now, when you give up what you chose to give up, a 3 and a 4 is the primary pieces, you would assume this is a player that's going to be a part of a Dan Quinn team here in Washington for quite some time. But you mentioned the talent and the existing talent that Washington had, and they had some young guys and St. Juste and Emmanuel Forbes, and it sounded like maybe they were going to gauge on Emmanuel Forbes going the other way. Not a part of this regime's draft picks as a recent draft pick. And do you accept sunk cost fallacy and get what you can if he's not a part of the plan? Well, none of that happened, but adding Lattimore to the room, you got to contend with the Philadelphia Eagles, right? With their wide receivers. Yeah. And I think this is a big piece of their puzzle for how you have an answer for A.J. Brown and how you can hopefully distribute the rest of the field from a passing game perspective. Because, they got some tough dudes up front in the trenches. They're pretty physical on the defensive interior. So you like their opportunity to match Philly in that regard. But the coverage thing was always going to be an option, a challenge for you. And I think Marshon Lattimore goes a long way in helping solve that puzzle for Washington.
It also gets Mike Samerstill back into the slot. He's playing outside lately.
How crazy is that?
Right. So let's get everyone back where they're supposed to be and let this defense evolve down the stretch. Kyle, I love this for the Saints. I mean, they're going to eat a bunch of dead cap. I get it. I love getting this return for them. But my goodness, does it make the Alvin Kamara extension even more confusing? Like, you're telling us that you're embracing a rebuild, that you're selling off, you're getting drafted.
They couldn't have possibly seen you were going to lose 2 more games.
Oh, man, I can't deal with it. You know, I'm going to try not to, like, bring up the Alvin Kamara extension at every turn with the Saints, but, man, it's hard not to. It's very confusing.
So the Saints, from a dead cap perspective, they're going to carry $14 million in dead cap this year. And then the rest of the prorated money on the Lattimore contract will accelerate to 2025 because it technically counts as a post-June 1st cut this year from a cap perspective. So it will be over $31.6 million in dead cap in 2025 for getting out of the Lattimore contract.
Over under on Saints rookies rostered in 2025.
Oh, it's going to be worse than what the Rams thing was.
This is probably 15
years ago
plus, right? Maybe.
I'd say maybe more. Now, here's the thing, though. The Saints really don't have a lot of easy ejection contracts. So it's not like they could just cut a bunch of fat because, like, you'd lose more cap space by doing that.
Understood.
So the challenge is, do you have enough roster spots based off contracts that you have played this game with to field the team in the right way? Now, we saw the Rams get out of it, and the Rams turned it around pretty quick. I think this is a more complicated case than that, but you had to start this process at some point. I'm at least encouraged that they bit the bullet and made a move like this to start this process, because they'll be out of it by the end of 2025 for this specific contract.
Feels like this Za'Darius Smith to the Lions was just a matter of time. Za'Darius Smith goes to the Detroit Lions. Za'Darius Smith in a 2026 7 to the Lions for a 2025 5 and a 2026 6. I mean, this was the move that they needed to make. I think that, I mean, I don't feel like they gave up much at all. I mean, this winds up being a net of 5 for Za'Darius Smith, who actually has a very favorable contract to take on, in addition to being under contract for next year. I think this is a great deal for Detroit. I'm a little surprised that maybe somebody didn't step up and beat that.
Can I give my stat before we continue with Za'Darius Smith? I found my stat.
Yeah.
For the first time since 2001, every team owns their own first-round draft pick after the trade deadline for the upcoming year.
There's every single team has one pick in the first round.
Yep. Every single pick has their own scheduled first-round pick in the first round for the first time after a trade deadline since 2001.
That's bananas.
Yeah, when you think about it, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's unbelievable. That's gonna change, right? That's gonna change.
Yeah, that'll change when the dust settles. I think you kind of have to figure out who the attractive players are, how many attractive players there are, what the actual draft order looks like with so many teams sitting at 2 wins right now.
Well, and let's be honest, I'm sure you've peaked like I have, but the upcoming free agent class, don't love it. And the upcoming draft class, Kyle, I don't love it either. So might not be a bad year if you want to, like, give up your first round pick for a player. Obviously, it's not going to happen until the new league year, but I'd be interested. I would be interested for sure if that made sense. Okay, I briefly got into the Za'Darius Smith trade. Let's fully get into that here on the other side of it, in addition to the Steelers and all the other odds and ends. Be sure to stick with us. Hey, NFL fans, remember our great partner, Ultimate Pro Football GM? Well, they're back and have added an amazing new game mode I need to tell you about. The game that has you step into the shoes of a football franchise GM and lead it to glory now has a head coach career mode. So on top of building your dynasty by drafting players, signing free agents, and hiring your coaching staff, you also get to call offensive plays during games. Additionally, you'll dig the new tools that you can work with, such as individual training camps and an upgraded negotiation system. So this fun and realistic game just got a lot better. If you already have it installed, be sure to update it so you can try out the new mode. If you don't have it yet, download it right now. It's a must-have for all football fans. I love it. I know you will too. Ultimate Pro Football GM is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. And here's a special offer for Locked On fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your franchise. Make sure to get it, as this perk will jumpstart your play and give you the advantage you need to create a winning dynasty. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com, ultimate-gm.com, or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate Pro Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. Here's what you do. You pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long with Prize Picks. I personally love that Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get money in as quick as 15 minutes. Prize Picks also offers Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this season. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
So after we do Za'Darius Smith, Joe, I have a little fun sidebar.
Oh,
just want to let you know. So I don't get quick snapped, Nothing worth not being ready to line of scrimmage.
Right. Yeah.
So
pre-snap penalties can't have them.
Cleveland tilting down the path of the dark side as far as it pertains to their salary cap management that we've seen the Saints that have been so effusive in their belief of the last, 8 years. Cleveland's earlier in that process. But I think this is a nice opportunity for them to avoid letting this thing get too far past the point of no return, right? And they've been very cash liberal as far as cash to cap ratio and spending amongst the top cash spenders in the league the last 3 years, trying to field a winning team, and that's come at the expense of a lot of contract restructures and, lump sum payments and minimum salaries, which is what makes Za'Darius Smith such an attractive, acquirable piece if you are the Detroit Lions. And we kind of talked about it already, but from a cash perspective, Za'Darius Smith, do you know the breakdown of the money that he's owed next year?
Tell us.
So he has a $1.5 million base salary by design, because Cleveland, when they signed him to the contract, they knew we want to prorate everything out as much as possible. So he gets a $2 million roster bonus. And then he gets an option bonus of about $7 million that is automatically spread out across 5 void years from 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, and 2029. So they're spreading $7 million out across 5 seasons. Those will be dummy years unless the Lions ultimately choose to re-sign Za'Darius Smith. That'll all accelerate into 2026's dead cap. But his cap hit next year for the Lions is less than $5.5 million.
Really good.
And that's for a player that's owed about $11 million in cash that you acquired for a 5th round pick. So you get this year on the books for $600,000, and next year he's on the books the next 2 year and a half against your cap books for $6 million in cap space the next year and a half combined. That's outstanding for Detroit.
Yeah.
And then for Cleveland, they take a $4.6 million dead cap hit this year, and then it's 14.2 next year. But just based off how we broke down the cash that he's owed for 2025, that would have continued to snowball into future years for Cleveland if they didn't move him off the books. So between that and Amari Cooper, they made a couple of moves to get contracts that had significant money and get it out before it got to the point of what we see the Saints are in right now.
Yeah,
I think that's a win for them.
Good player for Lions. Helps with the pass rush need that they have. Obviously, he's an aging player, but I think for the opportunities that existed, this made a lot of sense for them. Mm-hmm. And I wonder. I start to think to myself, why didn't they get this done a little bit sooner? You like to have him as quick as possible in your team. I wonder if Cleveland looked at this past week and said, "Hey, if we can get that 3rd win, maybe."
I'm sure they did.
And then they lose the games. Like, all right, well, let's trade Za'Darius Because it felt like Dan Campbell was hinting at this for a couple of weeks. It was just a matter of time.
Yeah, there was an inevitability of it. And the scheme fit made too much sense as far as the style of the player and what he can do. And they've kind of looked at guys and drafted and pursued guys that can reduce inside of an offensive tackle like we know Za'Darius Smith is capable of doing. He plays the run well. So I just think it's a perfect stylistic fit for Detroit.
Yeah.
That once Hutch went down, Smith has, I think, as many sacks as every other active player in the Lions roster right now combined this season.
Yeah, not great.
So, and Hutch is still, I think, in the top 3 in sacks this season, and we haven't seen him in a month.
Gosh, he was going to be the depoy, wasn't he?
He was. He was going to give probably the sack record a nice little run there too.
Yeah. Okay, so you had a sidebar before we talk Steelers?
Okay. I have a random draft class of the day for you.
Okay.
What do you remember about the 2013 NFL draft?
Well, first thing you got to that was the year before EJ Manuel. I always have to remember this by who the quarterbacks were, right?
Okay.
So who was that? Was
it was like the Teddy was 14.
Oh no, so this was the EJ Manuel year.
This was the EJ Manuel year.
Okay, so yeah, that's Landry Jones, Geno Smith. Okay, that's the draft class. That's what I remember about it.
So 13, and I don't know that our facts are right there. This was the Eric Fisher at 1. Year.
Okay. Yep. Luke Jokel, Lane Johnson.
At 2, Lane Johnson at 4. DJ Fluker at 11. Those were the top 4 guys drafted as offensive tackles. Do you know who else from an offensive line perspective came out in this class?
Zach Martin?
Just from drafted at tackle. Now I can go look at. Let me do the thing. But tackles. Think of tackles.
Fisher, Jokel, Lane Johnson was part of this mix. I mean, I remember those guys. I'm sure you're going to tell me something crazy about other ones that were drafted.
Yeah. So you had Fisher, Yokel, Lane Johnson, DJ Fluker drafted as the top 4. Okay. Justin Pugh drafted as a tackle.
Okay.
Really good guard though, right? Yeah. 75th overall pick that year was Teron Armstead. Third round.
Pretty good. Yeah.
A round later in the 4th round, David Bakhtiari was drafted.
Oh, yeah, he was pretty good.
Also in the 4th round, drafted as a tackle out of Cornell, J.C. Tretter.
Pretty good.
Very good player. Ricky Wagner, maybe not as sexy of a name here. Pick 203 in this same draft class, Ryan Jensen out of Colorado State Pueblo, drafted as an offensive tackle. You had an infusion of Lane Johnson, Teron Armstead, David Bakhtiari, J.C. Tretter, and Ryan Jensen in the same draft class.
I think the fun part there is the guys that went before him, right? Like,
right. You can get into
and Eric Fisher was a 10-year starter, right? Like,
you can get into the Menelik Watsons of the world, the Dallas Thomases of the world, the Jordan Millses of the world.
Jordan Mills had a nice little career.
Yeah, so did David Quessenberry, but he's also on this list as a guy.
David Quessenberry's still kicking, brother. He's still a reserve tackle for the Vikings right now.
Quest went in front of Jensen. He was the offensive tackle pick before Jensen.
Tough scene.
Offensive guards in that draft class: Kyle Long and Larry Warford, the 2 big standouts.
Those are despite Kentucky and Warford, right?
Yeah, despite 2 top 10 guards in that class, with Jonathan Cooper and Chance Warmack being the top 2 picks in that class.
Boy, did Mike Mayock love Chance Warmack.
So did I, to be fair.
I'm not. No, I just remember him raving about him every opportunity he could. Just best football player in this draft.
Travis Frederick also came out in that class as a center.
What a year, man!
Travis Frederick, Kyle Long, Larry Warford, Teron Armstead, Lane Johnson, J.C. Tretter, David Bakhtiari, Ryan Jensen, Justin Pugh. 2013 offensive line class.
You just stumble in this recently? Why are we talking?
Yeah. I think I was looking at some team's draft history, or you know what I was doing? I'm starting to do reports for 33rd Team. I was looking for a player comp for a player I was doing. So you go to draft history, you start scrolling names, and is there anybody that like pushes a couple buttons here that kind of reminds me of this guy? And that's how I felt.
All right, let's talk about the Steelers and have some quick takes on the rest of the trades here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with us. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So you can look at all of that, and then you can place a bet like, okay, is this player going to catch a pass on the next offensive drive? What's the result of the drive going to be? It's really fun, extra layer to making football watching even more exciting. So visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Steelers double dipped. Mike Williams for a 5,
Yep.
a 2025 5. I feel like that's pretty good return for the Jets.
Yeah, I do too.
And then they sent, it was a 7 for Preston Smith.
Yeah. Yo, moon balls and checkdowns, baby. Rust ball all the way in Pittsburgh.
Looks good. And another option to throw those balls to, it's run go balls and posts and go up and get it. High point the football.
Right.
Great.
And they already had the best 4-man rush in football. And Preston Smith's he's an aging player, but as an extra player, that's your 4th rusher? Like in that Marcus Golden role that they had last year was like a nice little fit down the stretch. Now they get him.
Did Marcus go back and then retire? Is that what happened there?
Yeah, because you watch him down the stretch last year, you're like, oh, I think he might have a little something. Yeah. It's like, okay, he retires. All right, well, we'll give a 7 and we'll get Preston Smith and maybe get that player right back in the mix. That's the recipe, right? Like this is it, leaning into what your team is. Big plays down the field on moon balls, big plays on defense, play special teams, run the ball. Like that's their script. If they're going to do it, which, I mean, I feel like they're going to be in it in terms of the playoffs. They're leaning into the things that they do well. I like these moves.
I think it's a great insurance policy for their pass rush room for Preston, who best years are behind him, but with what they're able to do with Hayward and Keanu Benton, depending on how many guys you want with their hand in the dirt, and Highsmith and Watt, and to have another guy that you can kind of be more ambiguous with, because I think that's the thing when you think about Herbig, Watt, and Highsmith. How many of those guys do you really like playing directly over top of a tackle?
Right.
You don't really like it, right?
Right.
As compared to Preston Smith, if you played him, I think you could still align in a 4-eye and give you some quality reps and wins, and you're not going to covet him playing directly over top of or directly outside and rushing with speed off the edge the way that the other guys can. So I think it gives you a different pitch as far as like your rush fronts and what guys you could put in what spots too, because he's probably a better rush option, if we're being honest, than Keanu Benton, if you want to keep Benton on the field. But I think it's a nice under the radar, like buy low buy. And for teams that were really interested in acquiring pass rush help, I'm surprised that didn't get more run as an option.
No doubt. Okay, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more deals to reflect on. So let's work through these very quickly. Cardinals acquire Baron Browning from the Broncos.
Great.
For a 2025 6th-round draft pick.
Outstanding. I know injuries have been a thing for Browning, but he looked like he was starting to put it together when he's been healthy.
And this player works with Jonathan Gannon. Of course, Dennis Gardeck was the version of this player, but going back to Philly, it was Hassan Reddick. I'm not trying to get crazy here, but that like speed, high effort, non-traditional base edge player, like it works in this defense. I think it's a good spot for him. He should get run. The thing with Baron Browning, the flashes have been tremendous. Stay healthy, my guy. Please.
Yeah, as guys that were super big fans of his brand. And Arizona really needs it as far as, having lost Gardeck and Ojulari, and like they just need guys that are going to be quality pass rush options, and he can do that. So I think this is a nice buy for them.
the Ravens acquire Tre'Davious White from the Rams. It's Trey
care.
White and a 2027 7 for a 2026 7.
Don't care.
Kyle, has there ever been less given up in the history of a trade?
This is the cheapest trade in the history.
It really is. A 7 3 years from now for a 6 2 years from now. Come on.
And they were going to cut him.
Right.
The Rams were going to cut him.
Right.
Now, Ravens, go get your guy. Sure, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it is what it is. But I know a lot of Ravens fans on at least that I saw yesterday were pretty distressed that there was no boost to the pass rush room. Like their pass rush win rate is amongst the worst in the league.
Yeah.
And, their pass defense has not been good. So a veteran guy there is fine. But you know it as well as anybody. The Trey White that you knew as the Pro Bowl player, he ain't coming back. And there's going to be a lot of matchups where if you try to play him in isolation, you don't feel good about his ability to stay with it anymore. Well,
I mean, the Rams did him dirty asking him to carry Jamison Williams one-on-one down the field. That's pretty insane.
Well,
but he can't really run at this point. But isn't there a piece of you that says, "Oh, it's the Ravens"? So you're like, "Oh, well, maybe."
And if it plays out that way, dude, I'll take the L. I'll wear the egg
Right.
on my face. That's fine.
Right.
But I just don't see a guy that can move anymore.
Right.
So I don't know how much he's really going to help you.
We kind of got the live reaction yesterday. Jonathan Mingo from the Panthers, the wide receiver, he goes to Dallas for a 4. Mingo and a 7 for a 4.
Hold on. Keep talking.
Mingo had a 7 for Dallas needed weapons. You watch Dallas, and it's kind of hard to watch because there's really nothing to be worried about outside of CeeDee Lamb.
Okay, I have. Dallas is just throwing picks away. You remember what they did at the deadline last year, or before the season last year? Who'd they acquire via trade last year?
Was it Brandon Cooks?
Trey Lance.
Oh yeah.
So now in 14 months, you've given up a 4th round pick for Trey Lance and then another 4th round pick for Jonathan Mingo.
Boy, it's bad. It's bad.
And you gave up that pick for Trey Lance for now Cooper Rush with Dak Prescott going on IR as your $60 million a year quarterback. Cooper Rush is going to be your starter, so he's your true backup. You're just throwing assets away for guys we liked in the draft with athletic tools. I don't mind the quarterback one as much because it's a quarterback, right? But then when the story unfolds the way that it does, you pay Dak the money. So Dak's your guy long term anyway. And Cooper Rush is still the backup. It's like, well, then what?
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you're going to do it, then make Trey Lance the backup.
The Bengals acquire running back Khalil Herbert from the Bears. It's for a 2025 7. Obviously, Zach Moss with the neck injury, needing some running back depth. Khalil Herbert's buried on the depth chart with Swift and Roshan Johnson. Kind of just like a logical trade, right?
Yeah. I think this is a win-win for both teams to get something for a guy you're not really going to use and get a guy position that you need and buy it for cheap.
It's nice to know that the Bengals are taking phone calls. It's great. And the last one, the 49ers find some defensive tackle help in the form of Khalil Davis from the Texans, that 2026 7th round pick.
You called it.
And need some help.
You asked
there.
for this.
I'm not sure this is the help that I would have got, but
San Francisco, get some defensive line help. So, okay, we got you, Joe.
Are you a little bit surprised that maybe some of the deals that didn't happen? I feel like we identified a lot of players that probably Carolina sends away Mingo. They still have Clowney, Sebastian Joseph Day, Arden Key, Azeez Ojulari. These guys are all still part of their teams.
It sounded like this is off of some intel that I had got about a team that had called inquiring about potentially adding. The feedback was that it was largely the cost to do business was relatively high. The expectations for what you were going to get. So the phrase seller's market was used. So if that's the case, I'm not surprised that we didn't get even more action if the asking prices were just not at a place where teams were willing to go.
I hear you, but you can ask all you want, but your value, something is worth what somebody's willing to pay. And so now you're stuck with these players and nothing for them. And you saw Preston Smith go for a 7. You saw Za'Darius Smith kind of go for a 5, right? It's a bag of balls. Baron Browning, a toolsy guy, for a 6. Like, you can't sit there and watch those deals happen and then sit there and cling to Arden Key and Sebastian Joseph Day.
Okay, well, what's Arden Key? Let's just use him as an example. Okay, bad example because he has multiple years left on his contract. I was going to say, is there a correlation between guys with multiple years of control left at like cost control dollar rates versus guys on expiring contracts? And was that a blockade? But the Arden Key is under contract in 2025. Now he's under contract in 2025 and due $7 million in cash, which I don't think I'd be interested in.
Sebastian Joseph Day.
Let me find out. We'll do the thing.
Pretty sure that's an expiring contract.
So Sebastian Joseph Day is an expiring contract. I don't know though. Like that, I don't think that helps your case, unless it's San Francisco.
Don't you feel like there's so many teams that are like, here, defensive line help? Everyone's looking for defensive line help. Oh.
I'm just glad we got a lot of action, relatively speaking.
Yeah,
there's times where it comes and goes, and you're like,
and a lot of it happened already, dude. We saw Devontae Adams and Deontay Johnson and Amari Cooper, and I mean, this has been going on. Josh Uche.
All things considered, the last 2 weeks we got like over a dozen trades.
Yeah,
it was like that. So I'm thankful for that. From a contract.
I think we'll get a little less, right? If the deadline's going to be, it's pushed a week further, you're going to get a little bit more on the front side of it, and probably a little less at the deadline.
Right, because teams have a better idea of if they're actually going to be in the running or not.
Right.
That's going to do it for us here on Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He is Joe Marino. We appreciate you guys checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. We are out of here. We'll be back again tomorrow to set the table for Week 10 of the 2024 NFL season. That's tomorrow. Come back and see us then.